Hi, my name is Alana Mitchell. I'm 31 living in Seattle, and this is the story of how my pregnancy almost became a business deal. Until I turned the tables and set fire to an empire built on silence. It started with a hangover, not mine, Tom's. We'd been dating for 11 months, that delicious stretch of time where you've memorized each other's coffee orders but haven't yet had the fight about whose family to visit for Christmas. That morning, I leaned against my bedroom doorframe, watching him sprawl dramatically across my bed, one arm flung over his eyes to block out the offensive morning light filtering through my cheap Target curtains. "I'm never drinking again," he groaned, making the same promise I'd heard after his corporate holiday party, his birthday, and that disastrous wine tasting in Walla Walla where he'd accidentally spit Cabernet onto a sommelier's white shirt. Laughed, tossing a clean t-shirt at his face. "I'm making eggs. You're eating them. Then we're talking about the fact that my period is 2 weeks late." The shirt slid off his face, revealing an expression somewhere between confused and stunned. I'd rehearsed this moment 17 different ways, none involving me blurting it out while he was nursing a hangover and I was wearing mismatched avocado socks. Wait, what? He sat up so quickly I think he gave himself whiplash. 2 weeks late. I held up my fingers in a peace sign, but peace was the last thing buzzing through my veins. "And before you ask, yes, I've taken a test. 3, actually. All positive." Tom stared at me, his jaw working soundlessly like a fish yanked from water. "I'm gonna be a dad," he finally managed. It wasn't the response I'd expected. But there was something in the wondering way he said dad that made my chest tighten. "If that's what we decide," I said carefully. "I'm still figuring out how I feel about all of this." He nodded, running a hand through his perpetually rumpled dark hair. "Of course, it's your body. But I just want you to know," he took a deep breath, "I'm in. Whatever you decide, I'm here." And that's when I should have known this story was going to get complicated. Because nothing, and I mean nothing, is ever that simple when it comes to the Prescott family. 3. Months later, I was standing in my bathroom, staring at the softest curve beginning to push against my jeans. Tom and I had settled into a cautious rhythm of prenatal appointments and late-night conversations about names and nursery colors. His parents had reacted with stiff politeness when we'd told them over an excruciating dinner at their waterfront home on Mercer Island. His father had cleared his throat approximately 47 times, while his mother had smiled tightly and asked if we'd set a date yet. But it was Tom's extended family I'd yet to meet, specifically the infamous Barbara Prescott, his father's sister and the family matriarch. I'd seen her in Seattle Magazine's most influential issue, her silver-streaked dark hair swept into an elegant chignon, smile as practiced as a surgeon's scalpel. Tom rarely spoke about her, but when he did, his posture changed, shoulders squaring as if bracing for impact. So when my phone rang with an unknown number and I heard her voice, smooth as aged whiskey and twice as potent, my stomach clenched. With something that wasn't morning sickness. "Alana Mitchell? This is Barbara Prescott." She didn't phrase it as a question. She knew exactly who I was. "Hello, Ms. Prescott," I said, straightening my spine despite being alone in my apartment. "Barbara, please. I feel we should get to know each other given the circumstances." The way she said circumstances made my pregnancy sound like an unfortunate plumbing issue. "I'd like that," I lied, because what else could I say? "Wonderful. Let's have lunch tomorrow. The Canopy, on Pike. Say 1 o'clock? Again, not a question. "Alone, if you don't mind. Just us girls." The line went dead before I could respond. I stared at my phone, suddenly feeling like I'd agreed to dance with a cobra. When I told Tom about the call that evening, his face drained of color so completely I thought he might pass out. "She called you directly?" he asked, his voice strained. "Without talking to me first?" I nodded, picking at the label on my bottle of sparkling water. "Is that bad?" He ran both hands through his hair, a nervous habit I'd come to recognize. It's unusual. Barbara doesn't do anything without a reason. It's just lunch, Tom. What's the worst that could happen? His laugh was hollow, empty of humor. With Barbara? That's a question I try never to ask. The Canopy wasn't just a restaurant. It was a statement. Perched 20 floors up in a gleaming downtown high-rise, it offered panoramic views of Elliott Bay and the Olympics beyond. The kind of place where the menu doesn't list prices, and the waitstaff move with the silent efficiency of well-choreographed dancers. I'd spent an embarrassing amount of time that morning staring at my closet, eventually settling on a forest green, wrap dress that made me look professional but not like I was trying too hard. My one concession to vanity was a pair of gold drop earrings that had belonged to my grandmother, a tiny talisman of courage. Barbara Prescott was already there, sitting, at a corner table with her back to a wall. Even seated, she radiated magnetism that pulled focus. Her charcoal pantsuit probably cost more than my monthly rent, and the single strand of pearls at her throat glowed even in the restaurant's diffused lighting. She didn't stand when I approached, merely gesturing to the chair across from her with a manicured hand bearing an emerald ring the size of a small pebble. "Alana," she said, her voice warm but her eyes assessing every inch of me. "So good of you to come. You look well." The next 15 minutes passed in a surreal dance of pleasantries. She asked about my job at a local marketing firm, nodding with polite interest. She mentioned an upcoming charity gala, the weather, a new exhibit at the art museum. But underneath it all ran a current of tension, like the low hum of electricity before a storm. It wasn't until our entrees arrived, halibut, for her, risotto for me, that she finally set down her fork and fixed me with a gaze so direct I felt pinned to my seat. "Alana," she said, her voice dropping to a confidential murmur, "I appreciate you meeting me today. I think it's important we understand each other." I nodded, my mouth suddenly dry. "I agree." "Good." She dabbed her lips with her napkin, leaving. No trace of her coral lipstick. "Then I'll be direct. I'm prepared to offer you $50,000. I blinked, confused. "I'm sorry?" $50,000, she repeated, as if I hadn't heard the amount clearly. "Tax-free. In exchange for your discretion and your departure from my nephew's life." The restaurant seemed to tilt around me. I set down my fork with deliberate care, afraid I might drop it otherwise. "Your departure," she continued, voice smooth as silk, "would naturally include terminating the pregnancy. My lawyer has drawn up the necessary paperwork. It's quite straightforward." A high-pitched ringing started in my ears. I stared at her, this elegant woman discussing the erasure of my child's existence as casually as changing dinner reservations. "And if I say no?" I asked, surprised at how steady my voice sounded when my insides were churning like Puget Sound during a winter storm. She leaned forward slightly, pearl necklace swinging gently. "Then things become complicated." Her smile didn't change, but something in her eyes hardened to granite. "The Prescott family has certain expectations. Thomas has potential that would be limited by an unexpected family. And you—" Her gaze flicked over me again, more dismissive this time. "Would find that challenging the Prescott name comes with consequences." "Consequences," I repeated, the word tasting bitter. "We have connections throughout Seattle, in banking, real estate, the legal system, even in sustainable marketing. I imagine." She shrugged one elegant shoulder. "It would be unfortunate if your career prospect suddenly dried up, or if your lease wasn't renewed, or if certain medical records became public." The threat hung in the air between us, as tangible as the scent of her expensive perfume. "You're threatening me," I said, no longer a question. "I'm offering you a choice," she corrected, her voice gentle as if explaining something to a child. "A very generous one, considering the circumstances." I looked down at my plate, at the artfully arranged risotto I could no longer stomach. Then I raised my eyes to meet hers directly. The circumstances, I said slowly, are that I'm carrying your great-nephew or niece, a child that is part of your family whether you acknowledge them or not. Something flickered across her face. Surprise, perhaps, that I wasn't immediately cowed, but it vanished quickly. Blood means less than you think, Ms. Mitchell. Legacy, reputation, position, these are what truly matter. I took a deep breath, feeling a strange calm settling over me. Thank you for lunch, Barbara, and for being so transparent about your values. She smiled, triumphant. Then we understand each other. Oh, I understand you perfectly. I stood up, gathering my purse. But I think you've misunderstood me. Her smile faltered, just fractionally. Have I? Yes. I leaned down, placing both hands on the table, my voice pitched low. Because if you think I'm the kind of woman who can be bought or bullied, then you've made a serious miscalculation. I straightened up, smoothing my dress. I'll be taking care of my own check. Wouldn't want to be indebted to you for so much as a piece of bread. As I walked away, I could feel her eyes boring into my back. My knees didn't shake until I was safely in the elevator. Only then did I lean against the wall, heart hammering against my ribs like it was trying to escape. Despite my brave words, Barbara Prescott had just declared war, and I had no idea how to fight back. Tom was in my kitchen when I got home, chopping vegetables for dinner. The domesticity of the scene, him in his socked feet, sleeves rolled up, humming along to music, made something twist painfully in my chest. How could this be the same family that had sent Barbara to erase me? He looked up, smile fading as he took in my expression. What happened? I set my purse down carefully. Your aunt offered me $50,000 today. The knife in his hand clattered to the cutting board. What? 50 grand, tax-free, to terminate the pregnancy and disappear from your life. The color drained from his face. Jesus Christ, he whispered. I had no idea. She didn't say anything to me. I studied him, searching for any hint of complicity. You didn't know she'd do this? No. God, no, Alana. He came around the counter, reaching for my hands. They were cold against his warm ones. I knew she wouldn't be thrilled, but this... He shook his head, looking genuinely horrified. This is beyond anything I could have imagined. I wanted to believe him. But there was something in his expression, a shadow of resignation perhaps, that made me pull my hands away. But you're not surprised, I said softly. Not really. He swallowed hard, his gaze dropping to the floor. Barbara has intervened in family matters before. She sees herself as the keeper of the Prescott name. A bitter laugh escaped him. My cousin dated a guy in college that Barbara didn't approve of. Suddenly he got a full scholarship to study abroad in Australia. Never came back. And everyone just lets her do this? I asked, incredulous. Tom sighed, running a hand through his hair. You don't understand what it's like. The Prescott name opens doors, but it's also a cage. Barbara holds the keys. My father's position at the firm, my mother's social standing, my trust fund. It all flows through Barbara. So what are you saying? My voice had a dangerous edge. That I should take the money and run? No. His head snapped up. No, of course not. I'm just trying to explain what we're up against. We. I arched an eyebrow. So you're with me on this? He stepped toward me, cupping my face in his hands. I'm with you. And the baby. 100%. I wanted to fall into his embrace, to believe that his devotion would outweigh a lifetime of Prescott conditioning. But something held me back. If you're with me, I said carefully, then you need to know I'm not just going to quietly disappear. I'm going to fight back. His hands dropped. From my face. What does that mean? It means Barbara Prescott just tried to bribe me to abort our child. It means she threatened my career, my housing, and my privacy if I refused. My voice strengthened with each word, and it means I'm not going to let her get away with it. Tom's expression cycled through worry, fear, and something that might have been pride. What are you planning to do? I don't know yet, but I need to know if your loyalty is to me and this baby, or to the Prescott family legacy. He flinched as if I'd struck him. That's not fair. None of this is fair, but it's the reality we're facing. I crossed my arms. So which is it going to be, Tom? For a long moment, he said nothing. The silence stretched between us, fragile as spun glass. Finally, he took a deep breath. When I was 8, I broke a vase at Barbara's house. Ming Dynasty, apparently worth more than my college education. I was terrified, but instead of telling her, my father took the blame. His voice was low, almost haunted. She made him work Sundays for a year to pay it off. Sundays were the only day he had with us. I waited, not sure where this was going. I've spent my whole life watching my family bend to Barbara's will, watching her reward loyalty and punish defiance. He raised his eyes to mine, something resolute, hardening in them. But I'm more afraid of being the kind of man who would abandon his child, who would abandon the woman he loves. My breath caught. It was the first time either of us had used that word. So, yes, he continued, taking my hands again. My loyalty is to you, to our baby, to whatever future we decide to build. And if that means standing up to Barbara, then that's what we'll do. I nodded, squeezing his hands. I wanted to believe him. I needed to. But as we finished making dinner together, as we outlined possibilities and strategies, a small voice at the back of my mind kept whispering, when push comes to shove, will he really stand against the family that's defined his entire existence? Over the next 2 weeks, I documented everything, every phone call, every email. When a non-disclosure agreement arrived via courier, I photographed it before sending it back, unsigned. To my surprise, Tom was true to his word. He spoke to his father, who was horrified by Barbara's actions but too afraid to confront her. He started moving money from his trust fund into a separate account. Not much, but enough to show he was serious about independence. Most importantly, he stood beside me at the 16-week ultrasound, tears streaming down his face as we learned we were having a boy. But the fight was just beginning. 3 days after the ultrasound, my landlord called. The building had been purchased by a new management company, and they would not be renewing leases. I had 60 days to find a new place. The next day, my boss called me into her office, expression grim. I hate to do this, Alana, but we're going to have to let you go. Budget cuts. You understand. I understood perfectly when I saw the new client. List on her desk. Prescott Properties was at the top. When I got home that night, I found an envelope that had been slipped under my door. Inside was a USB drive. No note, no explanation. Just a small black rectangle that felt too heavy for its size. Tom came over as soon as I called him. Don't plug it in, he warned. It could be malware. Or it could be help, I countered. Someone who knows what Barbara's doing. We compromised. We'd use my old laptop, disconnected from the internet to check the contents. The drive contained only a single folder labeled Prescott. Inside were dozens of PDFs, financial records, emails, legal documents, and most damning of all, a spreadsheet titled Interventions. Oh my God, Tom breathed as we scrolled through it. These are all the people Barbara's paid off. Mistresses, pregnant girlfriends, journalists, anyone who threatened the Prescott image. I stared at the screen, a cold certainty settling over me. This is from someone inside, someone with access to Barbara's private files. Before I could say more, my phone pinged with a news alert. Prescott Foundation under investigation for Fraudulent donations. We looked at each other, the same realization dawning. Someone was dismantling Barbara's carefully constructed facade, piece by piece, and they'd just handed us ammunition for our own battle. "I have an idea," I said, reaching for my phone. "But it's risky. For both of us." Tom took my hand, squeezing it gently. "I told you, I'm all in." I believed him this time. I had to. I dialed a number I hadn't called in years. "Danielle? It's Alana Mitchell. I have a story you might be interested in." Danielle Wu and I had been roommates in college before she became an investigative journalist for the Seattle Times. Her exposés on corporate corruption had earned her a Pulitzer nomination the previous year. She agreed to meet us, quickly scanning the documents we brought, printouts of the most damning files from the USB drive, along with my timeline of Barbara's attempts to erase me from Tom's life. "Holy shit," she murmured. "This isn't just about you. This is systematic manipulation, possibly fraud if these payoffs were disguised as charitable donations." "We know," I said. "That's why we're here." "Why go public?" she asked. "Barbara Prescott isn't just powerful. She's vindictive. She'll destroy you." "She's already trying," Tom said quietly. "Alana lost her job, her apartment. Next will be her reputation, her credit, maybe even her safety." He looked at me, something fierce in his expression. "I'm done watching Barbara hurt people I care about." Danielle turned to me. "And you? What's your stake in this besides the obvious?" I rested a hand on my slightly rounded belly. "This isn't just about me, or even about Tom and me. It's about all the other women on that list. All the people Barbara has silenced." She tapped her fingers on the envelope, eyes narrowed in thought. "Give me 3 weeks. No promises, but—" She gathered the documents, tucking them into her bag. "This has Pulitzer written all over it." For the next 3 weeks, we lived in a state of suspended anxiety. Tom moved in with me temporarily, both of us feeling safer together. He had a tense conversation with his parents, who were horrified but still hesitant to openly defy Barbara. His mother cried. His father drank too much whiskey and kept saying, "She's still my sister." The night before the story was set to run, I couldn't sleep. I stood at the window of our temporary home, looking out at the Seattle skyline glittering in the distance. Tom came up behind me, wrapping his arms around me, hands resting protectively over our growing child. "Are you scared?" he asked, his breath warm against my hair. "Terrified," I admitted. "You?" "Same. But also relieved. Like whatever happens now, at least we're not hiding anymore." The story broke at 6 a.m. Prescott Empire built on silence. Inside Barbara Prescott's network of payoffs and threats. By noon, it had been picked up by national outlets. By dinner, Barbara's lawyer had issued a statement denying all allegations and threatening legal action. And at 7:43 p.m., as Tom and I were eating takeout and watching the coverage on my laptop, his phone rang. Barbara's name glowed on the screen. He looked at me, face pale. I nodded. "Put it on speaker," I whispered. He answered. "Hello, Aunt Barbara." "Thomas." Her voice was ice, brittle and cold. "I'm disappointed." "I'm sorry to hear that," he replied, surprising me with his calm. "Are you? Because it seems you've made a rather definitive choice to betray your family." The veneer of politeness was gone, replaced by barely controlled fury. "The foundation is under scrutiny. Your father's clients are distancing themselves. Your mother was uninvited from the hospital benefit." "I didn't do this to hurt them," Tom said. "I did it because it was right." A harsh laugh crackled through the speaker. "Right? You've thrown away generations of privilege, influence. For what? Some girl you've known less than a year? A child that isn't even born yet?" I flinched, but Tom's expression hardened. "For family," he said firmly. "The one I'm choosing to build. The one based on honesty, not control." "Then you've made your choice." Consider yourself disinherited, Thomas. Your trust fund will be frozen, your position at the firm terminated. And when this infatuation has run its course, don't come crawling back. Is that all? Tom asked, his voice remarkably steady. Another silence, longer this time. You sound like your mother, Barbara said finally, an accusation that somehow seemed weightier than anything else she'd said. She had that same self-righteous tone when she married your father against my advice. Tom's eyes widened slightly, clearly a piece of family history he hadn't heard before. I built this family, Thomas. Everything you have, everything you are, exists because of me. No, Tom said, something new in his voice, something stronger. Everything I was told to be exists because of you, who I actually am. That's despite you, not because of you. You'll regret this, Barbara said finally. Both of you. The line went dead. 6 months later, I stood in our new apartment, nestling a tiny swaddled bundle against my chest. Miles Thomas Mitchell Prescott, 7 pounds of perfection with his father's dark hair and what the nurses called old soul eyes. Barbara had tried to sue us for defamation, but the evidence was airtight. Danielle's story had sparked a wider investigation into the Prescott Foundation, revealing tax evasion and misappropriation of funds that even Barbara's army of lawyers couldn't explain away. A month after Miles was born, I received an email from a woman named Rachel Chen. The subject, line, former Prescott employee, made my heart race. I think you should know, she wrote, that your situation wasn't unique. I was Barbara Prescott's executive assistant for 3 years. The contract she wanted you to sign was already drafted before she even met you. It's a template she's used, at least 7 times during my tenure alone. Attached was a scanned document with familiar language about relinquishing maternal rights. But the date was 2 weeks before Barbara had invited me to lunch. Rachel agreed to meet with us, her face obscured for Danielle's follow-up piece. She brought evidence that eventually formed the backbone of a class action lawsuit against Barbara by multiple women who had been coerced over the years. Why help us now? I asked her, struck by the risk she was taking. She twisted a paper napkin in her hands. My sister got pregnant in college. Her boyfriend's family paid her to disappear. Her eyes filled with tears. She took the money, got the abortion, dropped out, and she's never been the same since. When I saw your story, saw someone finally stand up to these people, I couldn't stay silent anymore. By spring, streaming platforms were bidding for rights to our story. Inheritance, The Price of Silence, became a 3-part documentary with interviews from lawyers, former employees, and women who had previously accepted Barbara's payments. Tom's parents were caught in the middle. His father, Martin, initially sided with Barbara out of family loyalty. But when the full scope of her manipulations became clear, including how she'd interfered in his own marriage, something in him seemed to snap. He showed up at our apartment one rainy evening, soaked to the skin and looking 10 years older. I've spent my whole life under her thumb, he told Tom, voice breaking. I don't want that for you. Or for my grandson. It wasn't an instant reconciliation. There were too many years of complicit silence for that. But it was a start. Barbara Prescott stepped down from every board she sat on. Her empire didn't collapse, but it shook. And me? I became a consultant for nonprofits helping women fight coercion and financial control. Tom proposed the night the documentary aired, after Miles had fallen asleep in his bassinet. Not with an expensive ring or grand gesture, but with a simple question. Will you build something honest with me? I said no, not because I didn't love him, but because I needed to prove to myself that I wasn't anyone's possession, not even his. We were partners, co-parents, maybe someday more. But first, I needed to stand on my own. He understood. Of course he did. That was the man he'd become when freed from Barbara's shadow. In the months that followed, I gave several keynote speeches across the country. Each time I stepped on stage, I wasn't just telling my story. I was holding a mirror up to a society that still let wealth and status silence women. I spoke for every woman who had ever been told she was inconvenient, for every woman pressured to disappear. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the skyline, Tom stopped by. He didn't come often, but he never missed a birthday, a pediatric appointment, or a weekend breakfast if invited. I was offered a seat on the City Council's Economic Ethics Board, he said, nervous. Because of what happened? I asked. Because of what I finally stood for, he answered. I nodded, then reached for Miles, who'd crawled over with a plastic giraffe. Do it. But make sure your last name means something different now. He smiled, and I realized, for the first time, that redemption wasn't impossible. Just earned. When I held Miles that night, I told him, "This is why we tell the truth, even when it costs us everything." Barbara Prescott faded from public life, disgraced. But she wasn't the story anymore. Miles was. And the legacy he would grow into, the one I chose, not the one they tried to buy, would be the one thing she could never put a price on.